Hey gang, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Whew. My name is still Dan Nelson. I'm always beginning to wonder. I've been missing for nearly 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Nothing like this has ever happened before, and I'm fine. It's just been an odd. I had a big job that wouldn't on location that wouldn't allow me to broadcast. That put me out for parts of 3 different weeks, and then I had a procedure last week in the hospital that just wore me out for a bit. Anyway, I am fine. Great to be back. Sorry to be missing for so long. Great to be back. All right. Oh, wait, and look at this, would you? I have, thanks to Ray out in Seattle, a brand new, big time now, Clapper Daily Art Adventure. I forget. Number 921, starting at 36 by 48 cityscape. Woohoo! Thanks, Ray. Out in Seattle. Probably part of the CHOP community out there. Doing some beautiful patties. See, they've got a lot of good artwork going on out there at the just like we do in Raleigh. A lot of beautiful artwork, paintings, beautiful paintings being done on the plywood downtown. I'm sarcastic and, otherwise a whole bunch of other words that we won't get into, will we? All right. I decided to start this painting just slightly different, not anything worth mentioning. You can see my reference up there. There's my photograph that I did not take. My client supplied that image for me, but it's a view very similar to one that I've done of Raleigh several times over the years, several times over the years, and in fact, you old timers. Hello, Michael. I am mostly well. There's something wrong with my throat. I don't mean wrong. I just mean I've got a frog in my throat for the last since my I had a I had a colonoscopy. If I tell you I had a procedure, all of your imaginations will run wild. So I'll just tell you what I had. I had an up periscope. When I woke up from the up periscope treatment, 20 minutes after I fell asleep, I had a painful pain in my throat. I mean, not just a pain in my throat, a painful pain, bloody, painful cut, scratch in my throat. And so far, everybody over there is denying that they did anything to my throat. Fell asleep, perfectly fine, woke up 20 minutes later with a cut in my throat. And they're all saying, no, Mr. Nelson, we didn't do anything. My reflection over the last several minutes is that just because you get an MD degree doesn't mean you're any more honest than you were before you had an MD degree. And that's pretty bad. Anyway, of course, it wasn't the MD who was working on that in part of my anatomy. It was the anesthesiologists who were supposed to keep it in. Anyway, we're not to the bottom of it yet, but for 3 or 4 days, I could barely talk. And now I'm just full of congestion. But let's not talk about that, okay? Let's talk about something fun, like doing a painting. So this painting, as you can see here, as you saw a moment ago, I won't show you again at the moment, the painting is exceedingly warm in tone. That's why I'm tending or trying to do, and warm and red. So that's why there's a lot of cool and green, a little bit of purple there in the middle, but that's just for variety. Hey? I look forward to teaching a class this year, if anybody's able to make it, at Art of the Carolinas 2020. Art of the Carolinas, November. Second weekend, I believe, second full weekend in November, I think. Every year this will be the, I don't remember, 15th or 20th anniversary or something like that of Art of the Carolinas. And I'm teaching one class called Painting in the Crazy Dan Nelson Way. It's been a while since I did a just how to paint like me class, and so I'm very much here it is. It's only June, and I'm already looking forward to thinking about how in the world I'm going to teach people. And it will distinctly be, hello Deborah, hello Peachy 3444, 3435. Well, hello Monica. Well, there we go. Now let's talk about stuff I'm looking forward to. I hope we can get some students. I'm looking forward even more to teaching an anatomy class. Monica, feel free to put if you're still there, feel free to put a link, please. Please, please, please. I'm teaching a class for Monica, Painting Miles, downtown Raleigh, North Carolina, 13 weeks. So that will almost certainly just be for people who live fairly nearby, I would think. Anyway, that's going to be a weekly class starting in August, I think. And I've been preparing. I've been doing my homework, Monica. I've been working on it pretty hard. And I'm very much looking forward to that. So everything I'm doing right now, as all you old-timers know, is this. Oh, I don't have a straight edge here. I've carried them all off. All right, no big deal. Everything I'm doing right now, of course, is pure abstract. Well, why are you doing pure abstract, Mr. Dan? I'm so glad you asked that. So, okay, now that answering that question takes a little more time than asking it, that's for sure. The answer is because this is the way I paint. I'm kidding, that's a terrible answer. It's kind of like the parent who says, because I said so. All right, no, it goes deep into. Let me answer another question though, that probably hasn't been asked, literally. What kind of abstract painting is this? Now that's a good question too, and I do have an answer to that. And I was, again, looking forward to Art of the Carolinas that I'm teaching next November. I'm going to bring lots of handouts. The first handout that I hand out will be one called, and this is already on my YouTube channel on the community page. My apologies to those of you who are watching or typically operate via an iPad. The strange thing is iPads do not allow you to see the community page on YouTube. That is such a strange thing. Anyway, life is full of strange things, isn't it? Evidently, like my scratchy throat. I like it. The joke is obviously they got they got mixed up about which end they're supposed to stick that thing in, and yeah, you know, that's the obvious joke, which I don't think is probably not what happened. Anyway, 6 categories of abstract painting, 6 approaches to abstract painting, and I'm not going to give them all to you right now. I'm just going to tell you which approach this is, and this is very typical of the way I start my paintings. This is called a kinesthetic and composition. Those two approaches. One is kinesthetic, means movement of body, movement, and that's what you see here. Is lots of big motions. So without apology, I say yes. This is a kinesthetically focused or kinesthetic-oriented abstract painting. Secondly, this is a composition-focused painting. That is, I'm thinking about placement, shape, and so on and so forth. And I think I'm done now, so I'm going to let it go at that. Oh, you know what? I'm not really. One more thing I want to see happen. I want a little bit more dripping, running going on here. So let's create a little more. I like runs. I like drips. I've discovered if you have to make enough of them so that there's no doubt in the viewer, the person who looks at my paintings, so that there's never any doubt in their mind that you did it on purpose. If you just have 1 or 2 drips, the ignorant viewer might think, man, it's too bad he made those drips. Okay, so do enough, and they'll go, I guess he did it on purpose because they're all over the place. All right. Now, before I do too much more, let me just do some quick drawing. And once again, I'm looking at this photo reference fairly carefully. And once again, because the image is so orange, brown, red. Because of that, I'm trying to make sure that much of my underpainting, initial underpainting, I should probably call it, the initial underpainting is a contrast to that. So the painting is going to be, the finished painting is going to be very warm. Therefore, my initial painting is going to be very cool. Simple enough? Good. And you can, I hope, probably tell by the way that I am moving, the way that I'm drawing, that I'm being careful. Let me switch to some purple violet paint. All of this, of course, is acrylics. These are and transparent acrylics, except for the white. Of course, that's not transparent. Transparent white is an oxymoron, right? If you ever buy if you ever buy a tube of transparent white paint, what should be in that tube? Air, correct. There is a company, in fact, I don't know which one, that actually does market it. They don't mean transparent white. What they mean is translucent white, and unfortunately they didn't hire an English major or a literate person in their marketing department to help walk them through that tricky business of the difference. It's not really tricky at all. Difference between transparent and translucent. It's actually, it's not actually difficult at all. Everybody listening to the sound of my voice, unless English is your second language and you're struggling to keep up, all of you know the difference between transparent and translucent. Anyway, all of my colors are transparent. I'm just explaining that again for a few of you newcomers who might be watching. Hello, Cruise Hawk. Yeah, exactly. Some intern was practicing intubation. That's what I'm thinking. I actually did talk to the performing surgeon, the doctor who was working on my south end just earlier today, and she rather predictably denied that anything unusual had happened, but she would get in touch. And I know it's not her end, it was the anesthesiologist, but anyway, I did a bunch of research and determined that probably when I was under, that they noticed that some fluid was threatening to run down my throat into my lungs, so they grabbed a suction hose and sucked it out, and that's perfect. Of course, that's fine. I would just like to find out, why did I wake up with a cut throat, which led to aspiration pneumonia. I was walking around for 3 days with my lungs literally gurgling, bubbling, wheezing with every breath, and that was not very much fun. I mean, I had a veritable symphony orchestra in my chest. I can't do it because I'll make myself cough. Too late. All right, here's what we're going to do today. This is, as you can see, a soupy mess. Very wet. And there's not really much I can do now until that's dry. So I'm just going to pause this broadcast. I'll make a little note on in my chat here. And let's say it's 4:45, about 4:45. I'll be back within 10 minutes, okay? Peachy got another theory here. Correct. Sorry, it was either not broadcast again or broadcast with a cough. All right. Hello, gang. Welcome to explain all the crazy reasons why I've been gone. No big deal. Just a strange throat's not so good, but that's a long story that I've already gotten into. And actually do a little bit of, representational, if you will. Hang on. I'm missing my, bear with me just so. Here's my medium. I'm pouring it on these brushes so that what I'm brushing will be a little bit more. What I'm doing right now is actually a nod, if you will, toward the actual color of the scene. So, and one thing the downside of commissions is I feel like normally you don't have quite the freedom to experiment that you do with a non-commissioned piece, because whoever's commissioning you has, of course, they've seen your work, and that's why they're hiring you, is because they like your work. And so making any hard turns to the left or right might leave your client going, but that's not what I wanted. So unfortunately, I'm having to play a little bit safe because I've actually been cooking up a kooky idea for masking the layers Some of you may have seen me several weeks ago. I used tape, packaging tape, to mask off, and now I'm going to play with literally rubber cement. But I don't know if it'll work. Oh, that's the other reason I don't feel free to play around on somebody else's painting, is because I'm not sure about the chemistry. What I'm doing right now is just abstract marks, making these red-orange marks a little more interesting. I brought you back just in time for a rather boring because I'm doing pencil lines, which are a little bit difficult for you to see, and I definitely apologize for that. Drawing, looking, pretty carefully at the subject in front of me there. And trying to pretty faithfully replicate, draw, render, capture the buildings here in this photograph. But of anything that would begin to approach tongue painting, or in this case tongue drawing. Could you see that? That's, those of you who've watched me do many portraits in the last couple of months know that I belie myself. I contradict myself all over the place. And I'm doing these fairly small portraits. Let me show you one that I hope finished just a couple days ago. And some of you, I actually did this online earlier. Can I zoom in and let you see that? Whoa, hang on, there we go. Okay, that's an old friend, Darcy, and her husband, Jay or Ray, forget. I had to redo, I think it's Jay, I don't know him. I had to redo his face. I had to keep working on it, I should say, because I emailed a copy of a photograph to my client. They said, he didn't quite capture him, which didn't surprise me a great deal. So I've been working on that painting. Anyway, when I'm doing a portrait that size, I do plenty of tongue painting and tongue drawing. Plenty. Complaining the whole time that I'm having to do it. But with a cityscape like this, there's very little need, very little call for that kind of horrible painting. So, in fact, some marks like that you just heard as well as saw are just pure kinetic energy, pure abstract marks. I never did answer the question I asked at the very beginning. So why do I do an abstract painting underneath my representational paintings? And this, again, just for what it's worth, this tendency, this general direction has been growing, increasing at a noticeable degree for several years. I've been sneaking up on this practice of doing abstracts underneath. So it's not something new, not something that happened all at once. It's something that's developed over a long period. But how to answer, if there's anybody new watching, I don't know if there's or not, how to answer the question, why do I do the crazy abstract underneath? Well, the answer is, of course, because it makes it a better painting. There we go. That was easy, wasn't it? I'm sorry, I just did a little bit of work where you couldn't see. Okay, that's all I can do with the pencils at the moment. Let's go back to a couple long-handled brushes. I'm going to continue drawing, that is, making distinctly linear marks, liney marks, outliney marks, in fact. Makes it a better painting. Okay, why does it make it a better painting? Man, I'm trying to think of how to answer that without launching into my usual, any usual rant. You regulars know very well. I say, no, don't ask him that. It'll set him off. It'll set him off on one of his rants. And today you would get rant and coughing. Would you like a rant with that coughing? No rants. Why abstract? Okay, I'm going to go back to my language. Again, this is just for anybody who is new following me. There may be, and no doubt that somebody new will watch this. Okay, why do I do abstract? All right, I'm going to use the terminology of an art, a typical art, and really for me, in my mind, thinking an ideal art journey. Here it is. You old-timers, sorry, go pour yourself a lemonade and make a sandwich because you've heard all this before. Ideal art journey. We spend the first half of our art journey learning how to paint stuff, and I'm just going to use the expression paint, even though it can include drawing and sculpting and goodness knows what all. Okay, we spend the first half of our art journey learning how to paint stuff that looks like stuff. We spend the second half of our art journey, and not all artists make the transition to what I call second half, and in some cases that's perfectly fine. Some artists just are not. That's all right. But some artists are screwing up by not making the adjustment. Okay, so I want to make that clear. If you're a young person, what I'm describing, I think, is an ideal journey. So don't get stuck on not doing it. All right, second half of your art journey, I'm going to use cutesy, if you will, cute terminology, and here it is. First half of our journey, we learn to paint stuff that looks like stuff. Second half of our art journey, we learn to paint stuff that looks like paint. Let me put that in other words, in different words now. Second half of our journey, we're more concerned with the purely visual elements of the painting. That is to say, line, shape, texture, color, composition. All of you who took art way back in high school or somewhere, you recognize that list. It's like, oh, you mean the principles of design. Bingo! That's correct. That's correct. So let me restate it. We spend the first half of our art journey, I think, ideally, and the halves are not divided evenly. The first half of our art journey, learning how to paint stuff, render stuff accurately. That's a really good exercise. Good season. I spent a long time in that season. I was a full-time illustrator for decades. And as an illustrator, it was my job almost always either to do cartoons or to paint stuff that looked like stuff. Very rarely, as an illustrator, was I called upon to do an abstract or non-objective painting, right? It just didn't happen very often at all. Second half, and I didn't get in the second half until about 2004, so I was turning 50 years old when I made the transition. And a light bulb, very significant, and I could tell that story. I have told it, I'll tell it another time, not right now. Second half of the journey, I'm more concerned about you could turn the painting upside down and it would still contain the same line, shape, design, value, color, contrast, so on. Contrast is an interloper in that list, but you get the idea. Now, a really good question to ask next would be, well, why? Why make the jump, the transition, using Star Wars language, why make the jump to hyperspace? Why don't you just keep painting or drawing stuff that looks like stuff? Why do you, Dan, obviously I think that is a superior activity or position than the first half, which is, again, no insult against all those fabulous artists, many of whom are my dear friends, who do realism and stick with even hyperrealism or superrealism or whatever you want to call it. Very real realism. Why do I think that that's not the best path? And indeed, I don't think it's the best path, otherwise I would still be doing it. Now, I still do it on occasion just for fun, and that is true. It is true. Some of you, especially if you're an early artist, you suspect that many artists do impressionistic paintings simply because they lack the chops to do realistic paintings. And I hate to tell you that your guess is perfectly correct. It galls me to say you are correct, but you're not correct in my case, and you're not correct in the ideal case. I mean, you look at Rembrandt, who's in my camp, and say, I don't think you could draw very well. I don't think you do. Or, as I've already mentioned, one of my other ubiquitously cited heroes, John Singer Sargent. You look at him and say, man, too bad he painted so sloppy. You might say that, but it's only because of your own issues if you do. All right. I'm just getting a little bit pretty. And I know pretty's a horrible word. I almost use it tongue-in-cheek to irritate some of my contemporary friends. I'm not above irritating people, evidently. I do it all the time. One of you just said he does it all the time. Speaking of which, anybody saying anything? No, hang on, just a minute here. My chat is not chatting, so let's see if we can get that going. Is it going now? I think it is, but nobody's saying anything. All right, you're welcome to just watch and not. All right, so why is now I call my style, but I don't call it impressionistic because that's too close to a very particular school, 19th century painting called, as you know, Impressionism. And this is definitely not Impressionism, so I don't like calling it impressionistic, even though that adjective is accurate, but it connotes the wrong thing because people think Impressionism when you say impressionistic. So anyway, don't use that term. I use the term abstract realism. I got that from David Lefel. I think he spells his name Lefel, just like it sounds. He's a big dog painter, not like me. I'm a little dog painter. You can tell by the size of my bark. very little dog painter. Jim LaFell's a big dog painter, and I heard him several years ago, 10 years ago probably. He called his style abstract realism, which really helped me a great deal because I went, bingo! That's what I've been trying to say. I yelled at my computer screen as he said that. Yes, yes. Abstract realism, which means, and you can't tell by looking at this painting at the moment, but if you are familiar with my work, and you can see my work at dannelsonart.com, if you look at my work, you can say, oh, I mean, I'm clearly a realist. I mean, right? I'm not part of the cool crowd that's doing non-objective stuff or very, very, whatever, political stuff. So not part of that crowd at all. So it's definitely realism, but it's definitely not very realism. Hyper-realism. It's realistic, but there's a lot of other things going on. And why do I consider that to be the superior position? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. And if I'll quit interrupting myself, I'll try to answer that question. Why is abstract realism superior to real realism? In my humble opinion. Okay. And one of the answers, there's many ways I could answer that. I'll try to do it without getting into any of my rants. As you all know, I'm very capable of launching into a rant unannounced at any moment. Oh no, there he goes. On another rant. Okay, I'll try to answer that. Why do I think it's better? One way to put it would be when you do second half of journey, painting that looks like paint, that means line, shape, color, design, value, texture, the elements of design. Like, what does this color red down here mean? It means red. What do these lines mean? They mean line. What do the shapes mean? Shape. The edges mean edge. The texture means texture. In other words, it's purely visual. So, abstract paintings, or what I call abstract realism, abstract paintings are universal. If the human race lasts 1,000 years, I think, and don't mess up my theory because I'm very happy thinking it. I jest. I really do jest about that part. But I think if human beings last another 1,000 years and they still have these things called eyeballs, which I expect they will, and they still have the part of their brains that process visual information and stimuli, they will essentially respond to my paintings the same way I'm responding to it. In the same way, primarily as a hodgepodge of line, shape, design, value, color, texture. When I use the word design in that case, I mean compositional design, okay? And that's a problematic word because it has several meanings, but in that list, that word design means use of space would be another close correlation to that. Now, why does that matter? See, am I really painting this for human beings 1,000 years from now? Well, in my flightful and frightful fancies of ego, I could perhaps convince myself that but that's kind of crazy. No, I'm not painting for 1,000 years from now. I'm painting for today. I'm just using that as an example of what I mean by universal. Again, that is to say that no, I'm going to use different terminology. Instead of saying universal, watching. I set my device says 8 people are watching. Would one of you just say hi or something like that? I know you're all enjoying being sneaking in incognito, and you're more than welcome to hang out incognito. You don't need to identify yourself. But if one of you wouldn't mind, that would let me know that in fact my chat monitors is in fact working. Sometimes my chat freezes, my chat monitor, that's the best terminology, literally freezes up. And I've restarted mine twice now, and still no chats from you, which does make me think maybe it's frozen up. All right, so I was going to use a different terminology. I'm going to leave myself my own chat. Here we go. I'm going to leave a chat myself, see if it works. Oh, yep, worked fine. Next thing I'm going to do, by the way, is white paint. Opaque white. That's always one of the most fun stages or phases of the painting process for me, is this first layer of white, not counting the white I did in the abstract session. So now I'm looking for, there we go. Hello, Travis Lloyd. Thank you. Glad you're enthralled. You're very kind. Okay, I keep interrupting myself. I'm trying to explain, why do I do that crazy, not only the crazy abstract, why do I do everything else I do? Because it's all for the same reason, using irritatingly simple language. Everything I do is designed to make it a better painting. You could also say a more beautiful painting. But some of the terminology I was aiming for here was purely visual. There we go. So a minute ago I said universal. Why do I, instead of doing hyper-realism, so to speak, or really realism, I'm not limiting myself to just the term hyper or anything like that, but why don't, like so many artists do, especially with the advent of the internet and YouTube and so forth, as you all know, you can find scores of artists who just happily, they pride themselves. I'm glad that they're happy with themselves, but they do extreme realism, and I would have to admit that that's probably the majority of painters. Is it? Very possibly the majority of popular painters on the internet are those who do extreme, or not even extreme, but tight realism. The terminology I usually use, and I'll admit it at first so that it's not quite so bad, it is a term of derision. It's a put down. So I want to take the sting out of it somewhere, so I'm not just being nasty. But it's a terminology I've used quite a bit. And that is, they paint purdy pictures. Purdy pictures. I think that is spelled P-U-R-D-Y. Pictures, like a pitcher of water or a pitcher of lemonade. Purdy pictures. As opposed to pretty pictures. That is what most artists, okay. And I'm trying to answer the question to why, and I've talked about this so many times before. I think it's partly because I've been gone for nearly 3 weeks, which is by far the longest hiatus I've had, by far, since I started Daily Art Adventures 3.5 years ago. I guess I feel a little bit impelled because I'm thinking, well, maybe I've got somebody new I might accidentally. And so I'm starting with some Dan Nelson 101. Why do you paint so crazy? The first step in the craziness is maybe the most crazy. One of the most crazy is, why do you do an abstract purdy pictures? No. And again, blessings, salutations, respect, not adulation, but respect. And to all those of you who do paint. pretty pictures. And of course, usually about 2 times every year, I go through a little soul searching when I walk into into a party picture gallery where the artist has made a career of painting party pictures in a high tourist district, and they're selling for tens of thousands of dollars. And I forehead slap, because of course I could do that. And that's what in a sense, that's what I did for 40 years. All right, but why not paint party pictures? Well, again, this is a rather negative term, but it makes the point real quickly. Again, forgive me for the negativity, but the reason I don't focus primarily on painting party pictures is because they're trifling, sentimental. Now, there'd be by the way, let me hasten to add, there would be a whole lot of contemporary artists, modern artists, I'm using the term here not in the strictly academic sense, but just in the general man on the street sense. My art would not be, right now it looks like modern art, but when I'm finished, you know, my professors in college, by the way, I don't know, that is a good question. I'm not really sure that it is true anymore. Anyway, be that as it may. The contemporary crowd, they would, with curled lip and snarling tone, would call my stuff, all those bad words, too. So maybe it's just a matter of where you draw the line. But I'll tell you where I draw the line. I draw the line at visual. Is it a visual painting? Or is it a sentimental painting? And that's the difference. All right, I'm getting tired of talking about this really quickly, so let me try to bring it in for a crash landing really quick. I believe that my paintings are primarily visual. Now, of course, and I'm serious about this too, all the things I do as an artist, I don't do by accident. I am keenly aware of the historical and philosophical positioning, where I place myself in the journey. Another way to put that is, I am knowingly going against the quote-unquote modern artist. Again, I'm using the term here in layman's, not in academic sense. In the academic sense, modern art ended in like 1950 or something like that, depending who you read. But I'm just talking about the way an ordinary person uses the term. Anyway, like I said, I'm getting tired of talking about this. Let's move on to something else. My goal, I'll try to ease off from that. My hope, my dream, my ambition as a painter with every painting, of course, is to create beauty. Oh, maybe we should go from bad to worse. Maybe we should talk about beauty for a while. My goodness. And if there was any card-carrying member of the art establishment listening up until that moment, they slammed their phone down, probably stomped on it, or threw it in the open sewer running through there. That came together rather sweetly, didn't it? Lots of modern artists in that autonomous zone there in Seattle. Yeah. Okay, beauty. So my goal is to create beauty. Corollary to that is, and I do sometimes purely abstract. That is to say, non-objective paintings. I was just showing someone here, here's, for instance, I mean, it's been a while, so it's about time for me to launch into another This can go any way, I think. But okay, there's an abstract painting. The correct term is non-objective. Oh my, I'm signed down there, so evidently it's supposed to go this way. Anyway, nothing but line, shape, composition, value, texture. I'm just showing you that just for grins. In my book, purely visual art is beautiful art. I have no interest in preaching political sermons through my paintings. That's why I am not a card-carrying member of the art establishment. Most of the people who have BFAs and MFAs in the Western world today, especially if they got an MFA, they really had to drink the Kool-Aid to get an MFA, and they're convinced. In fact, it's an unexamined assumption, by the way, on their part, that artists are supposed to be political commentators. I was at, again, not to get political myself, I was at a rally, quote unquote. I was at a rally. Everybody knows we're in a very challenging moment in our nation's history, and I was at, by accident, by the way, but once I found myself there, I said, okay, cool, let's see what these people have to say. And they had it was only about 100 people, maybe 150, about 1/3 to almost 1/2 of whom were white, and 2/3 were black. And one of the organizers got up and I was going to say cajoled, but it doesn't need to be that negative, exhorted her audience, the artists in the audience, to be, she said, be more radical in your art. Be more radical. Be more. Painting and poetry were the two art forms being most obviously referred to at the moment. And I didn't do anything because I didn't want to out myself. But inside I went, oh, there goes another, all the poor, young, and clearly mostly black artists, if there were any, just had their careers trashed, in my opinion. Not careers, because they could go on to be famous and Uber, whatever. But they, if they followed that advice, if they were influenced, and clearly most artists are in fact influenced by such stuff, by the notion that it's their job, their primary raison d'etre, reason for their existence, is to raise hail, is to of course, and you all know, is to stick it to the man, right? You understand, the man is a business person who is in fact creating wealth for everybody around him. Unless you're an avowed Marxist. Most people are not avowed Marxists, they're just accidental and ignorant Marxists. I throw down the gauntlet. I just finished reading Karl Marx's Das Kapital. Biggest pile of horse pucky, unbelievable. I can summarize it for you though. It's real easy. Really easy, and of course you're getting a jaundiced view. I'll own that right up front. One very poorly written book. I could go on. I could go on into a serious rant, but I will resist somewhat here. Hang on just a second. Let me stop painting and think hard for a moment. summarizing Kant is easy. I mean, I've been studying him for several years, both his attractors and his detractors. It's quite simple. He takes two of the damaging impulses that beat inside every human breast, and he says to every human, no. I'm doing this, as you can see, with some drama. I feel a rant coming on. Pray that I can hold it back. The pulse that beats in the breast of every human being who ever lived is envy. Anybody who thinks they don't struggle with envy is just lying. We all struggle with envy. I mean, pretty much take all the 10 commandments, right? Thou shalt not commit adultery. Well, if adultery were abhorrent to the human condition, no scripture in the world would supposedly say that, so as to, whoops, too late. But I'm not trying to say that you need to, get religious or be converted in order to converse with me. My point was going to be all the injunctions in the 10 Commandments, of course, they are all things that all human beings struggle with. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the Big Ten, right? And by the way, no, I do not live my life according to the Big Ten. That's another story. The Big Ten, in a sense, a moot point. I live my life by the Big Two, if you want to know. Some of you know easily where this is going. I don't live by the Big Ten, I live by the Big Two. The Big Two are real simple. Number one, love God. Number two, love everybody else. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to do. Love everybody else the way you love yourself. So if you don't love yourself, you can't love others. So, and I would love to unpack that and analyze that for you, but no need, probably. I'll leave it right there. So one of the Big Ten is thou should use the good old King James 1611 English, roughly the same era as Shakespeare. Don't envy. Why? Not because God wants to ruin all our fun, but because he knows it's not good for your soul to envy people. Doesn't end well. And likewise, don't hate, because that's the other half, the other wing of Karl Marx's airplane is envy and hate. So Marx, in essence, of course, he doesn't believe in God, of course. And again, that doesn't have to be the salient point here, whether one does or doesn't believe in God. You can still have the conversation. In spite of what Stefan Molyneux says. I like Stefan Molyneux, but very limited when it comes to invisible realities. Anyway, I digress. So Marx comes along and says, forget what that ancient Hebrew God said. Things go better with envy and hate. That's what Marx said. He says this under the thinly veiled disguise of compassion for the poor. I like saying it that way. I'm sorry, a little bit of mockery in my tone, I confess. Come out, mockery, come out. So Marx says, envy the poor. Wrong. Marx says he thinks he has compassion for the poor, for the workers, even though he himself never lived among them, and every time he encountered them, he despised them. I've not only been reading Karl Marx, I've been reading several biographies of his, so I would claim now, rather arrogantly, to be a rather educated me only if your opinion on Karl Marx is based on some decent research. Anyway, Karl Marx, thinly veiled compassion for the poor, in reality is envy the rich and hate the rich. And the reason Karl Marx, this is my theory. Boy, we're getting deep now, aren't we? Hang on, gang. Hello, Peachy. Oh, good. We got some people. Peachy, oh, excellent question. Are abstract paintings more fun? No, they are fun. They are fun. Are they more fun? No. Are they easier? Oh, heck yes. He's commenced to cussing now. You know things are getting serious. Yes. No, I really enjoy them. Sincerely, I've done hundreds of abstract paintings and like them. So let me answer your question, Peachy, sort of in a real quick. I just said to my brother-in-law, who's living with us for a little while right now, Yahoo, Uncle Mark, that one of the things I like best about my career is variety. The variety in it. So I love doing abstract paintings because of the variety it affords. So there you go. But I also love doing hyper-realistic, photorealistic. You can find several of those on my website. Some in the portrait department, some in the airbrush department. Anyway, they are fun. They are indeed. More fun than this? No. These are more difficult, more challenging. Again, what I call the abstract realism, abstract realist paintings. Oh, I got a marking completely in the wrong place over there. What was I thinking? Where was I? Marx. Oh, okay. So the reason for Marx's popularity, and go ahead and answer that, just for what it's worth. I knew you were dying to find out why, is because, in fact, because the desire to envy the rich, to envy anybody. I mean, heck, we envy beautiful people, we envy tall people, we envy healthy people. The list is endless. We envy talented people. The reason Marx hit a home run in the human soul is that he aimed low. It's the same reason why pornographers will never lack a market. In the same way that the producers of drugs and alcohol, for that matter, nothing wrong with drinking in my book, just stupid to get drunk in my book. So the reason Marx is popular is because it says to the human race, no. You should envy good, envy good. And because all of us, being human beings, are born with a natural craving to move toward envy, it's a slam dunk. That's really what I think. And not only envy, but then hatred. We're supposed to hate the rich because they're the ones that are causing all of our pains and problems. And if it weren't for the rich, I would be rich. There's a wonderful irony, isn't it? Anyway, how did I get on that? I don't know. Be that as it may, let's get off it. I'll come back to it another day. Let's start another rant. And Deborah, yeah, let yourself go. That's a great way to put it. Great way to put it, Deborah. Can I go? My easel can only go but so high, and I'm close to the limit already. Okay, rant number 4. Who's counting? I don't know. Since I'm on a roll, I am a big believer in beauty. In fact, my belief, to use that funny terminology, my confirmation, I'm not sure what word to use, toward beauty is growing as not because I'm getting older, because that's not my age is not the driving force in my life. Soul, perhaps, my intellect, if you want to be a little bit more shallow and safe. In our uber materialistic culture, in our culture, you get in trouble anytime you begin to even breathe anything about invisible realities. And yet everybody in our culture lives by invisible realities. There's a very few, university art professors, university philosophy professors who would be cognizant of their worldviews and live somewhat out of pride in a manner more or less consistent with the worldviews. Everybody else just lives helter-skelter, hell, I won't come, hell or high water. They just live according to how they feel like living, and they're hardly even aware of their own worldviews, let alone forming them. But anyway, I'm one of those philosopher-type people whose my core identity is much closer to that of a philosopher than a painter. And that is very true. My master's degree, if you will, is much more, you can look it up and see what it is, and then you'll see their degree was primarily focused on history and philosophy. Not just God focused, not just God history, God philosophy. Even though I take that very seriously, but I'm a student of human nature, and he's a student of history. Anyway, so at least I think of myself as much more of being a little defensive here, because many times over the years I've had people say, "You're a good painter, stick to painting, stop talking." Well, I'm probably more knowledgeable about it than you are. In fact, I'm probably, the truth is out. Now we know how arrogant I really am. There you go. Any human being who lives to my age, late 60s, and has been busting his gut intellectually for 40 years, frankly, busting gut intellectually, is better informed than most people with a PhD, if that's all they have is a PhD. Now, if they have a PhD and they're in the late 60s and they've been busting gut, then they're my peers. Do you understand? But I do not have it. Here's a tragic reality. Not only do I have no automatic respect for PhDs, I have automatic disrespect for PhDs, because I'll tell you why. Here's a rant. People who get PhDs are path followers. Followers of the herd. If you have a certain set of skills, mostly in the realm of linguistics, that is, you're good with language and you're good with numbers, then a PhD is like falling off a log. Some of you don't know that because maybe you don't have those gifts, whatever. If you're good at talking and you're good at math, you too can get a PhD. All you have to do is follow the sheep's butt right in front of you, and you too will have come out the other end with a PhD. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't many brilliant people who have PhDs. There are. So just because you have a PhD doesn't mean you're an idiot. But just because you have a PhD doesn't mean you're brilliant either. Anyway, so the truth got out. I accidentally let you know just how arrogant I am. And hats off to, there's many of you like me. There's many of you like me. You spend your whole life working. Good for you. You are my partners. Anyway, meanwhile, isn't this fun? Yeah, Peachy, you're exactly correct. I sound like a parent who says they don't have a favorite kid. Good analogy. What I'm doing right now is, if there are any little bits of the white acrylics that are still wet, little piles, because in some places it's thicker, I've just smeared those out so that they'll dry more quickly. But it's very important, if you do that you do it with long, strong motions. You don't go like that. That creates an ugly mark. So you do long strokes, and then it creates a good mark. Okay, see ya. I heard some of that. Thanks for your work out there today, Mark. Appreciate it a bunch. Are you serious? Oh my goodness. Okay. Unc Mock. Power washing around the pool out there. Yes, yes, we are rich people. We own a pool. All right. I hope you recognize sarcasm when you hear it. But on the other hand, chances are you are too. All right. More glazes now. On top of all that white stuff that I just did. Being careful, as you can see, pretty much at every stage of my painting process could have this description over it. Being careful not to be too careful. Okay? And I say that when I'm teaching a live painting class, I'm saying that all the time. Be careful not to be too careful. Be careful not to be too careful. Why? Because I'm trying to create a beautiful painting. All right, and now hang on, that's worth answering. So some of you said I don't get the connection. I know you're making a beautiful painting, but why then be careful not to be too careful? Okay, because beautiful marks, there's that term, that word, that dangerous word again, for which I would be utterly laughed out of the academy if I were in the academy, which I ain't. So that's one thing to be happy about. The word beauty. Beautiful marks are created by beautiful movements. Let me say that in the negative. You can't make beautiful marks with ugly movements. And by ugly movements, I'm thinking now like a dance instructor. You want as a dancer, I'm not a dancer, but I can watch a dancer and say, you can watch a ballerina. Is that what they're still called? Anyway, a ballet, or male or female, when they're twirling around doing jumping and all this stuff. I'm aware, I'm assuming most people are too, that they are keenly aware of the position of their pinky, of their fingers. They've worked that out when they're doing a spin. It's not an accident that their hand goes like that. When their instructor says, no, breathe, blah, blah, blah. Beautiful movements. So when it comes to painting, beautiful marks on the canvas are created by beautiful movements. You cannot make beautiful marks by making ugly movements. There's where the reference to a ballayer, a ballerina, comes in. Ballerina. Beautiful movements. Unless it's, of course, rite of spring. That's another story, isn't it? Intentionally ugly movements. That's another topic. I don't want to get into that rant. Only so many rants in a day, I would say. I've had plenty. I'm in rare form today. I've put a rant warning on the cover. Isn't that fun? I'm talking about my painting. Isn't that fun? Let's bring that down here, by the way. And well, I've got some dirty purple paint on my brushes. Let's go way up to the top here. Another way to put it, beautiful marks are made by strong, energetic movements, not by puny, insecure, halting, stuttering, and ergonomic movements. Again, that's another whole subject, maybe for another day, I'm not sure. Let me do something now. Painting with a rag, just lifting off some of that darkness I just put on. But please notice the marks. See, if I allowed the what I call the spirit of eraser to come on me, which is a grumpy, angry attitude, like, oh, suck it, I made a mistake. And then I would paint very badly, okay? But there is no spirit of eraser on me at all. No exorcism necessary here. Do you see? In fact, everything pretty much humble opinion. I am continually, at least trying to make beautiful marks or interesting marks. Okay, let me get practical for just a minute, because I opened up another big term with that when I said ergonomic stroke. Okay, first of all, define the word ergonomic. When you go in, nowadays, you can go into a Home Depot, Lowe's, and buy a tool, and it'll say new ergonomic design. Like, whereas in the olden days, the hammer was just straight, and your hand had to conform to the hammer. I'm making this up. Now they've got this rubberized thing that fits your fingers, fits the human hand. I don't think I've never seen such a hammer, but you get the idea. So that's ergonomic, means it fits human physiology, fits the way our body is made. So ergonomic strokes are those strokes, those movements that you might make as an artist. Philosophical stuff I've been saying so far. Pay attention to this. If you're an early journey painter, you are probably doing a lot of your painting, the marks that you make with a brush in your hand, the movements that you make, it's very likely that you make them because of your physiology, not because of your art mind. Many of the movements you make, if you're a beginner, so we all had to get through this, you're making them because it's easy to make. Let me show you one. Here's another one. Any mark that you can make quickly and repeatedly. Lady one-on-one one time, and I gave her this ergonomic stroke lecture, and I said, so, don't do a windshield wiper, don't do this. She said, oh, I get it. So a few minutes later, I looked over there, she was going like this, a figure 8. It's an ergonomic stroke. Once again, ergonomic stroke is something that fits the way your bones, muscles, tendons are arranged to make certain marks easy to make. That's not what makes, those are not beautiful marks. Those are, you're going this way instead of that. Anyway, never mind. You want to be looking, what is it going to create on the canvas is the question you want to ask yourself. Anyway, so do not use any of those strokes. The most common one is the windshield wiper. Second most is just swishy, brushy, I usually call it. All right, pencil. Do one more. I'm happy, by the way, with, generally speaking, with the way the painting is looking. Let me see some of the comments here. Peachy's still talking good. Peachy, you're exactly correct. The Academy is, well, for one thing, one of the myths that they're totally consumed with is art is about self-expression. Anyway, I could lecture on that for hours. I will resist the temptation. But art is not about self-expression. I mean, it's not necessarily, and if it is, it's very bad art. And that's the reason why those who believe that create such horrendously bad art. It's because they are expressing themselves. I don't give a flippin' rip about your self-expression or how you feel about the melting Antarctic ice or how you feel about saving the whales. I really don't. I don't think you're an expert, for one thing. I don't. Especially if you're 23 years old and you're earning a MFA or a BFA. I could care less. I do care if you can create beauty, if you have skill. In fact, oh boy. Anyway. I think that college art students should not be allowed, so to speak. I'm being over stringent, you understand. So I don't mean this literally, but essentially, all art students under the age of 30, pretty much, are early journey painters, and their job should be learning how to paint stuff that looks like stuff. When in fact, in the academy, express themselves. Yeah. They're not teaching them how to paint for the most part. They're teaching them what political views to have. Of course, that nobody needs to be taught that. It's in the air in Western civilization. If you want to be one of the cool cats, you simply subscribe to either what Karl Marx taught or his interpreters in the 150 years since. And then you're cool. That's all you have to do. Then you're part of the... I'm being silly. All right, but somebody had asked me a question about, oh yeah, self-expression. That's I've done that. Hello, Marcus Cassius. Good to see you again. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. Actually, I'm going to do a little bit of pencil drawing. But I'm going to call this broadcast done. Full to the brim, with more rants and raves than you can shake a stick at. I talked about my coughing at the beginning of this broadcast. If you wonder, no, thank God I did not have coronavirus. Not even terribly worried about it. I hate to tell you. Some of you are going to freak out. No, you're supposed to be terrified like me. Ah! In fact, if you're not terrified, you're the reason I got it. Ah! Oh, boy. Don't get me started. Too late. No. Anyway, I'm going to end this broadcast before I do any more rants and give my sore throat, a break. But I'll tell you where I'm going from here. I'm going to do one more layer of pencil. With each layer, I try to get a little more realistic, a little more accurate, making corrections here and there, a little more detail, just a little bit more. Being careful not to be too careful is a working principle at every stage of the process. Being careful not to be too careful. And then I'm going to